Hello, quick PSA that I'm going to have to use a lot of self-censoring throughout this video for references to the subject matter that appears in the film. I'm sorry, don't blame me, blame the YouTube gods. Second thing, in order to properly discuss the controversies in this film, I have to talk about the central twist, so this is not a spoiler-free review. Really quickly, here is my spoiler-free Letterboxd review. I gave the film a 4 out of 5. I didn't think it was perfect, but I enjoyed it a lot. I actually like the film the more that I sit with it and think about it. But everything after the intro is fair game for spoilers. You have been warned. 3, 2, 1. So The Drama is one of those films that I've heard about in the background for what feels like years at this point. The film was written and directed by Christopher Borgli, who we will get back to, I promise, and was this year's A24 Golden Child, meaning it's a film that they actually decided to give a decent marketing push to. R.I.P. Ironclaw, I don't want to talk about it. I'm actually surprised that they went so hard on the marketing, considering that this film was considered to be controversial before a trailer was ever even released. The reason for that being the movie's central twist, that Zendaya's character had planned to commit a mass shooting at her school when she was much younger and hadn't gone through with it. When I first read this leak, somewhere deep within the bowels of the FOMWA subreddit, I had the same immediate reaction that a lot of other people probably did, which was, wow, that seems like it has the potential to be bad shock value, or at the very least, in poor taste. Like, I didn't know much about this director, and so my brain immediately jumped to corny, true crime, Lifetime-esque movie. But then as the marketing campaign started to ramp up closer to the film's release, my opinion changed, and I think that's a testament to how good of a job the marketing team for this film actually did.
A movie studio is promoting an upcoming film by hosting a pop-up wedding chapel in Las Vegas. Zendaya and Robert Pattinson star in The Drama, which opens in theaters April 3rd. And to promote the movie, A24 is hosting The Drama Wedding Chapel Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon at the Chapel of the Bells on Las Vegas Boulevard near Sahara. Couples who would like to tie the knot there can learn more at thedramaweddingchapel.com.
The marketing for this film really leaned into that vintage wedding aesthetic. A24 opened a chapel for couples to get married at, with Zendaya even appearing as a witness. They also had printed old-school wedding announcements for the main characters Charlie and Emma, and the trailer doesn't show you much other than the fact that these two are getting married, and that something is clearly very off. Whether this is subconscious from the leak that folks had read, or just the fact that A24 usually doesn't pick up straightforward romantic comedies, I don't think that anyone went into this film thinking it was going to be Love Actually, you know what I mean? But I did think it was interesting that the twist, or even the way the twist comes to light in the film, is not alluded to at all, so it's kind of a bait and switch, but not in the way that you'd expect. Additionally, throughout the press tour, there seemed to be a lot of love for the way that Zendaya and Rob were behaving, in that it didn't feel like they needed to sell some fake, you know, basically subtextually in love, actually in real life kind of chemistry to sell the movie. For example, Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi got a lot of heat for that when they were promoting Wuthering Heights. They seem like friends who genuinely enjoy each other's company and have proper co-worker type boundaries. And I think that was a bit refreshing for people. I think this also ended up establishing a sense of trust with the audience. Like, look at these two great actors who were just palling around and talking about how much fun they had filming this movie and the chemistry that they have with each other in like a non-weird, pushy, sort of genuine way. Maybe this movie isn't going to be exploitative trash. Maybe there's nothing in this movie that's going to make me sit with uncomfortable feelings or make me feel discomfort at all. Maybe that Reddit leak wasn't even real.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
So here's a brief plot summary for The Drama. Charlie and Emma meet in a coffee shop. They fall in love and they decide to get married. What we see after their initial meet cute is a glimpse into their relationship through their wedding prep, how they feel about each other while they're practicing their vows, that kind of thing. Then the movie drops us off at this long dinner scene with the best man Mike, who's Charlie's best friend, and the maid of honor Rachel, who is Mike's partner. The conversation evolves into the worst thing that each of them has ever done. Mike tells a story involving a dog that's pretty innocuous. Charlie can't think of anything. Rachel says that she locked a mentally disabled boy in a closet, and Emma, who is pretty tipsy at this point, admits that when she was younger, high school age or so, she planned on committing a mass shooting with her dad's rifle, but she didn't go through with it. She also reveals that the reason why she's deaf in one ear, which Charlie never knew, is that she shot the rifle a little too close to her face and lost her hearing as a result. Rachel reacts very aggressively to this because she has a cousin who was paralyzed in a school shooting, and Emma and Charlie go home to deal with the impending fallout. The film is almost theatrical in its direction and presentation. I could totally see a version of this playing out on a stage. We see flashbacks to Emma being bullied as a child as she's telling Charlie the story in the present. We see how she imitates the aesthetic of edgy mass, and it's played in a comedic way. She records her goodbye manifesto but is interrupted when the computer keeps updating. In the present, we see how Charlie is starting to crack under the pressure of this revelation, reevaluating things like photographs on their wall or coffee cups that have gun imagery on them. We also learn that the only reason Emma didn't go through with the plan was because there was another in town that same day, and inspired by that event, she and her friends actually get into gun control activism. Charlie has a hard time rationalizing this as well, proposing that maybe there was a more virtuous reason for her mental state at the time than just feeling lonely, like maybe it was from watching her neighbor die in a car accident. He uses this justification later in a way that is also very funny. The pressure eventually gets to Charlie so much so that he kisses and tries to have sex with his coworker Misha a few days before the wedding, which, if you haven't guessed, becomes the worst thing that Charlie ever did. The wedding itself is a series of misunderstandings and hyperbolic errors in which Emma finds out about Charlie's infidelity, which gets revealed to the whole room and gets him beat up by Misha's husband. The film ends with Charlie and Emma sitting down together in a diner and reintroducing themselves to one another, something that Emma had suggested earlier in the film in an attempt to work through the situation. Okay, brief thoughts on the movie. I thought that this was refreshingly honest, and it didn't turn out to be what I thought it was going to be at all. I thought it was going to be more of a true crime style, man in this relationship uncovers, without the woman admitting it, that she is not who she says she is. I liked that the twist of this movie happens relatively quickly. It happens up front, and the rest of the movie is both of those characters working it out together. It recontextualizes the entire sort of shock value aspect of it for me. I thought it was really smart. I also like how everyone's identity ends up playing a pretty significant role in the film. Emma was originally written to be a white woman, and I think the context of the story actually changes pretty significantly when you cast a black woman in the role, especially in contrast to Rachel, who is a white woman played by Alana Haim. When Rachel finds out about this secret, she wastes no time pouncing on Emma and centering herself, making the situation about herself, all while not recognizing her own hypocrisy. She offhandedly at one point says to Charlie that her black husband grew up around guns, implying, that it's out of line for Emma to do something like this just because her father was in the military, which is something that we learn about her character. And Mike, the black husband of this white woman, is like, why did you frame it like that? I grew up around guns because my dad was a cop. And you just hear everybody in the theater like audibly groan, and it's perfect. Additionally, it makes perfect sense to me that Charlie is a bit older than Emma, and he's British, he's not American. He didn't grow up around the fetishization of gun culture in a way that a lot of American kids do, so he doesn't resonate with that aspect of Emma's story at all. Like when she says that she was doing it for the aesthetic, it doesn't compute to him that that could be a thing. And he's older, so he didn't grow up in the age of social media. He doesn't understand how kids who grow up in that culture could be impacted by this sort of thing. I don't think that the movie was perfect. In particular, Brian and I saw it a couple days ago, and we both had this kind of same critique that we think it loses steam a little bit during the wedding scene, just because I feel like we have seen so many wedding gone wrong scenarios, and this one felt a little bit goofy, a little bit over the top, a little bit like stuff that we've seen before, whereas we felt that a lot of the other parts of the movie seemed really unique in comparison. However, the movie did win me over with its final scene with the two of them in the diner, which is something that they had referenced. It's actually a callback to like a couple previous moments in the screenplay, and I feel like it just ends on a very hopeful, real, raw, honest note. And like I said, the more that I think about it, the more that I like it. The movie's also very funny. Like, it definitely leans on the tropes of a black comedy really heavily, which brings me to my next point. There's a lot of backlash surrounding this film. So it was inevitable that whether you knew the twist going into this movie or not, people were going to feel some type of way about it because the topic of gun violence in America is sensitive. Multiple school survivors have come out to condemn the inclusion of its subject matter, and I'm genuinely not trying to invalidate their feelings about it because everything about the situation is frustrating. The fact that we don't do anything about gun violence in America is frustrating, but I also don't think that means that there's no place for dissecting that aspect of our culture or even poking a little fun at it. This movie makes the point that edgy mass shooter manifestos are cringy, lame, loser shit, and that the solution to that is community instead of isolation and further online radicalization. Not to mention the fact that Americans are so desensitized to gun culture that there's a lot of uncomfortable comedy there in the premise of Charlie processing all of this for the first time as a non-American. Last year, a podcaster got publicly assassinated, and that's this year's biggest meme. If you want to make a modern day black comedy, I don't think that subject matter is off limits. I've also seen the argument that the movie should have a trigger warning for those uncomfortable with the subject matter, which I think is more of a reasonable argument, but I don't think the marketing was careless or dishonest here. I think it was very intentional. The movie isn't really about the gun violence, it's about the relationship between these two people and how complex a relationship can actually be. The mass shooting plan is essentially a metaphor for the idea, though what was the worst thing you've ever done but maybe didn't act on could be anything in theory. Contrast this with something like It Ends With Us, where I said this in a video after I walked out of it.
Don't watch this movie if you have assault trauma. Don't do it. There are so many people who are going to get baited into watching this movie, and they really shouldn't. Don't watch this movie if you have assault trauma. Please don't.
Because I thought that film had genuinely irresponsible marketing. It was marketed entirely as a saccharine traditional love story, but it was about the ramifications of domestic abuse. This film is about relationships and doesn't pretend to be about anything that isn't that. Plus, I think in this case, the A24 name does go a long way. I think people, for the most part, know what they're getting into. But if you have a different opinion, I'm genuinely interested to hear your thoughts. So that's The Drama, guys. Wow, what a movie. It's crazy that it's called The Drama, and there's been a lot of drama surrounding the drama. God damn it, it's that fucking elephant again. It recently came to light that Christopher Borgli, the director of this film, wrote an essay in 2012 defending his relationship with a teenage girl. The Norwegian filmmaker, who was 27 at the time that this essay was published, reflected on dating a high school student who was, quote, 10 years younger than him in Norway, and in Norway the legal age of consent is 16, although from what I understand it is generally still frowned upon to do that, and rightfully so. So he technically didn't break a law in his own country, but this is still very gross, especially because in this same essay, he cites watching Woody Allen's Manhattan as a moment that made him think about the situation differently. Fucking disgusting. So, can I say that a film about the layered complexity of the worst thing you've ever done, and how that affects the relationships of those around you, written and directed by a man who has actively tried to justify his own predatory behavior in the past, makes me view the film in a more cynical light? Yes, which sucks, because it's good. The other weird thing about this was that people were weirdly trying to blame Zendaya for what the director did. So, for example, people were pointing out this TMZ article that is titled, "Zendaya's the drama director admits to dating a teen girl in an unearthed essay." Why does that article start with the word Zendaya? It does not need to start with Zendaya. I also don't feel like it's fair to argue that she or Robert Pattinson knew about this. This director had another popular movie that came out either a year or two ago called Dream Scenario, starring Nicolas Cage, which I did not see, but this whole essay is being unearthed now. It was not unearthed during his last big movie, so like, why would they know about it? Maybe they found out about it at the same time that we all did. In general, I feel like, and we're gonna talk about Euphoria next week, so I feel like I'm gonna have more expanded thoughts on this. People get so weird about Zendaya, and I really don't understand why. To me, she's not doing anything all that different or all that problematic in comparison to like her peers in the acting world. Do I think that this movie is the best performance that she has given? No. But to say that she is totally out of place, which is a critique that I've seen, or that the movie doesn't know what to do with her, like, I personally don't see how you get there. Like I said, we will revisit this when we cover Euphoria again next week. I say this all the time, but I think how you feel about supporting this film now that you know this information comes down to you and what you value and what you're willing to let slide and what you're willing to rationalize, which in some ways reflects the point of the film. If you want another example, I used to be a big Kanye West fan, and now seeing him have his redemption tour at SoFi after putting a song out called Heil Hitler gives me the ick. I don't feel comfortable listening to his music or supporting any of his future endeavors, but clearly there are some people out there who have no problem with it because he said sorry. And that's a real thing that happened, not a fictional character in the film admitting to planning something and then not doing it. The real world is full of contradictions and people who will go the distance to rationalize that they're consuming media and engaging with art and life in a way that is entirely unproblematic, and talking about how they're doing so on the app owned by a Nazi. I like that this film attempts to explore this nuance in a raw and honest way, and I hate that the film's writer and director thinks it's cool to fuck 16-year-olds. I hate that those things coexist, but pretending like they don't coexist does a collective disservice to the era that we're living in, I fear. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I want to draw your attention to my brand new, newly designed, spiffy Linktree, and also on that Linktree is a link to my second channel, where I recently did a Q&A/update about all of the projects I have going on, where you can connect with me on social media, my channels, and like other frequently asked questions. So check that out if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching. Let me know what you thought of the drama in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week. Bye!